I used to work as a housekeeper for this wealthy couple. The pay was good, the work was straightforward, and most importantly, they had no kids running around, as that was something I dreaded most about my housekeeping career. I came in twice a week, and most times, I had the house to myself. My cleaning routine was pretty mundane. Clean the living room, dust the shelves, and scrub the floors. My client, Mr. Green, was a nice and jovial man in his late 60s who lived alone in the mansion after his separation from his wife years ago. This was until a young woman moved in. She looked to be in her 30s and had a stern face, or what people called a resting bitch face. I had heard Mr. Green call her Lily, which I doubt is her real name, but I'll call her Lily in this story. Lily didn't live in the mansion when I started housekeeping for Mr. Green a few months before. Mr. Green had brought her a couple of weeks ago. She was elegant, with an air of mystery that seemed to follow her every move. I'd see her in the halls, always with her beautiful dress and heavy makeup, gliding like a ghost through the mansion. The strange thing was that she never left. When she first arrived, I thought she might be his daughter or relative. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized who she was to him. His mistress. I'd catch glimpses of her from the corner of my eye, always at a distance, like she was constantly watching me. One evening, I was pushing my cleaning cart through the hallway when Lily approached me and instructed me not to venture close to a particular door down the hallway. She said the room was off limits and didn't need cleaning anyways. The door was not hidden or anything, just a regular door at the end of a hallway, but I had never cleaned the room before because it was always locked. One day, I was walking down the hallway about to begin my cleaning when I heard faint whimpering sounds coming from the forbidden room. I stopped dead in my tracks and listened. I heard low murmurs and hushed tones, and then suddenly the sound of a whip. It sounded like someone was getting flogged with a whip. Suddenly I heard a screech, and I could have sworn that was Mr. Green. Curiosity got the better of me. I stood outside their closed door, my ear pressed against the wood, listening. After listening for a few seconds of what sounded like painful pleasure, I turned and walked away disgusted. I have always been puzzled as to why people found pleasure in things like that. About an hour later, I was cleaning the hallway when I saw something that made me uncomfortable. Lily opened the forbidden door, just a crack, to step out. Through the narrow opening, I caught a glimpse of the room, dimly lit, with what looked like Mr. Green laying perfectly still on the floor. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward, hoping she hadn't seen me. Lily quickly shut the door and walked away. At this point, I was not sure if I just saw what kind of kinky stuff they were doing, or if it was Mr. Green lying motionless on the floor. I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind, telling myself it was a bizarre scene from my twisted imagination. I had finished my cleaning, but I stalled for a little longer, feeling really bothered about what I saw. I knew I wouldn't be able to leave without making sure Mr. Green was okay, so I made up my mind to go over to the forbidden room to get a closer look. I walked down the hallway and stood in front of the door. I glanced around to make sure Lily wasn't around the corner or something, then seized the doorknob and turned it slowly. The door creaked open, and I peered inside. The room was filled with all weird-looking tools, handcuffs, whips, and things that looked like torture devices. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I stood frozen in the doorway. Mr. Green was laying on the cold floor exactly how I had seen him before. He was indeed motionless. It didn't even look like he was breathing. I ran over to check his pulse. My rational mind attempted to dismiss the grim reality I had just witnessed and thought that it could have been a joke. I fumbled for my phone and I dialed 911. While I was on the phone with the police, I heard some noise outside and looked out the window to see Lily hurrying into her car with a suitcase. I yelled on the phone that the woman who killed Mr. Green was running away, but it was too late. Within seconds, she had zoomed off. I remember shakingly sitting on that cold floor next to Mr. Green's body, waiting for the ambulance to arrive. Till this day, Lily has never been found. So, this crazy incident happened in March of 2013. I was 27 and a bachelor at the time. I lived alone in this seemingly ordinary apartment building in New York. You know the type, nondescript, quiet, with about 30 flats filled with people leading their own lives. I never paid much attention to my neighbors until a series of strange events unfolded, all centered around the guy who recently moved in and lived directly above me. His name was Vince, a strikingly handsome and likable middle-aged man. Always polite with a charming smile. I mean the kind of neighbor you'd exchange pleasantries with in the hallway, He was everyone's neighbor from hell, as he would make banging noises and stomp around all day in his flat. I never thought I would grow to dislike him so much, but I did. At night, the banging noises will increase, as well as really loud rock music, making it impossible for me to have a good night's sleep. I had politely gone up to his flat to complain, but he would only lay low for a couple of days and then resume the chaos. I remember one particular night I had gone upstairs to politely ask him to turn down his music. I had stood banging at his door for over 10 minutes before he came out sweating profusely and wearing cleaning gloves that were dripping with what looked like water. I stuttered as I was taken back by his appearance. I quickly regained composure and politely asked him to turn down his music. He mumbled something, waved his hands, and shut the door at my face. As soon as the door shut, a woof of bad odor swept across my face. I had never smelt anything like it, but it was really offensive. What was more offensive to me at that time was him banging the door in my face. I stormed downstairs to my apartment, making a mental note to call the landlord and lay a complaint, but I never got around to doing that. Rumors had it that he had had 3 failed marriages, and I was not surprised. Despite this fact, I would see some ladies in the flat basically throw themselves at him. One even offered to cook for him or do his laundry, but he was never fazed or interested. I had once heard a neighbor down the hall call him gay, and I began to suspect the same too. One faithful day, when I got home from my night shift by almost midnight, I had seen him walk into the apartment building with a different young man for the 2nd time that week. I was disgusted to my stomach. I'm not homophobic or anything like that, but the young men I had seen him with looked really young. I doubt any of them were up to 20 years of age. About 2 months later, an unbelievable discovery was made. It started innocently enough, with strange sounds, gurgling, clanking, and water refusing to drain properly. At first, I dismissed it as a minor plumbing issue, the kind of inconvenience you'd expect in any old building. But as the days passed, the problem escalated. A few of us noticed water backing up in the sinks and strange gurgling noises in the pipes. We discussed amongst ourselves and figured it was just a minor issue, maybe a clog from too much hair or debris. But as the problem persisted, the stench became unbearable. Unable to endure the foul odor any longer, we informed the landlord about the situation. He sent a plumber to check out the problem. When the plumber guy arrived, he ventured into the bowels of the building to investigate. That's when things took a chilling turn. 3 tenants, including myself, waited in the lobby as the plumber delved into the pipes beneath the building. Moment later, he discovered something that turned everyone's face white with dread. He informed us that the pipes were clogged with what looked like pieces of meat. He hesitated for a minute before adding that it didn't look or smell like animal meat. The 3 of us marched towards one of the main pipes, where he showed us the pieces of meat clogging the pipes. The stench was out of this world. We immediately called the police and explained the situation. About an hour later, we had a forensics team running tests to determine if the pieces of meat originated from an animal or a human being. It didn't take long for them to find out the truth. The pieces of meat found was not just any meat, but human flesh. The entire building was thrown into chaos as the gruesome news spread like wildfire. The police descended on our building like a swarm of locusts, investigating each apartment with a meticulous thoroughness. It didn't take long to find out where it came from. My upstairs neighbor's door was kicked down, and words cannot describe the stench that came out of that flat. He was nowhere to be found, but the police found a body dismembered in his apartment, the pieces neatly labeled and disposed in several buckets, ready to be flushed down the drain. It was the stuff of nightmares, the kind of horror you expect to see in movies, not in your own apartment building. His victims were local boys, seemingly chosen at random. He would approach them at nightclubs and bars and lure them to his flat. The police had confirmed 4 victims, and Vince was arrested a few days later. The more I learned, the more I realized just how close I had come to being a passive observer to a sinister crime. I've got a bone-chilling tale to share, something that happened to me just the other night on a desolate stretch of highway. I can't shake the feeling that I dodged a bullet, or more accurately, a nightmare that unfolded after I tried to help a stranded woman with car troubles. It was one of those dark, lonely highways that seemed to stretch on forever, and I was making my way home after a long day. Out of nowhere, I spotted a woman standing next to her stalled car, hazard lights blinking in the distance. Now, call me naive or overly sympathetic, but I've always had this thing about helping people in distress. Little did I know the horror that awaited me. Little did I know that my attempt to lend a helping hand would lead me down a dark and twisted path that I can't shake from my mind. As soon as I pulled over, the woman, looking frazzled and desperate, approached my car. She explained that her car had broken down and she was stranded. I offered to take a look at her car, thinking maybe it was just a minor issue I could fix. As I poked around the engine, it became clear that this was a more complicated issue beyond my amateur skills. I suggested we lock up her car and drive into town together, where we could call a mechanic to sort out the problem. She refused, though. It was almost as if she was terrified at the thought of leaving her car behind. Despite my persistence, she wouldn't budge. Her face went white with fear when I suggested calling the police for help. She turned to me and with a menacing voice told me not to go away and not call the police. I asked her if she had anyone she could call, and she frantically nodded. Yes. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number while walking away to have the call. I couldn't hear what she was saying on the phone, so I waited till she was done with the call. She came back and informed me her fiancé was on his way. I offered to sit with her and wait for him, but she refused and began pacing up and down. She said that if I wasn't going to be able to fix her car, I could leave. She looked like she was having a mental breakdown, and the tension in the air grew, making me feel uneasy. Now, I'm a pretty trusting person, but something about the whole situation set off alarm bells in my head. It was pitch black, and the isolation of the highway at night can make anyone uneasy. I waited for a couple of more minutes and drove off, leaving her alone on that desolate highway. Driving through the night, I couldn't shake the worry that lingered in my mind, so, against her wish, I decided to call the police, just to be on the safe side. I explained the situation, how I offered my help but felt something was off, and they assured me they'd send someone to check it out. Little did I know I had just narrowly escaped a nightmarish encounter. The next day, I saw the news, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. The woman I had encountered on that lonely highway, the one with car troubles, was probably the most terrible human being I had ever met in my life, and her face continues to haunt my nightmares. The news read that in the trunk of this woman's car were the lifeless bodies of her 2 sons, aged 2 and 6. I was called in for questioning by the police, and the gruesome details emerged. After I drove off that night, the police had showed up to investigate. According to the police, as soon as she saw them, in a fleet of panic, she ditched her car and ran off into the dense bushes. She didn't get far before she was chased down and apprehended. Her suspicious attempt to escape led the police to think she was drunk or was in the possession of drugs. Nothing in this world could have prepared them for the sight that would be revealed in the trunk of her car. She had killed her own kids because her boyfriend at the time had asked her to and was on her way to dispose of the bodies when her car broke down. I couldn't fathom how I had been inches away from that trunk. Little wonder why she was adamant about leaving her car behind. I felt a mixture of relief and profound horror, knowing that if she had accepted my offer to drive into town, who knows what could have transpired.